Welcome back to Gushing Blood.
Quarantine edition.
So here we are in New York City. The quarantine, the lockdown.
What are we,
still.
6 weeks in?
Something like that. Yeah, absolutely. And it feels like being in the most boring horror movie ever made.
Yeah.
You know? And we've been good. For the first 2 weeks, we only went out for like a hot second.
Yeah, I think we went to get groceries for like $300 and...
In 6 weeks, we've left the apartment like 5 times or something, I would say, which is pretty wild, to not leave your apartment more than 5 times in 6 weeks. But we share an elevator, there's 2 elevators in our building and they're slow as fuck and there's always people on them and it's like impossible to avoid people.
Yeah.
So there it is. But since we were, stuck in one location, we thought we might talk about Paranormal Activities and figure out if it holds up,
Yeah.
Like, it's the most successful movie ever made by, like, return on investment standards.
Yeah, it was made for $15,000.
Like, $15K, and they made, like, $193 million. And that's, like, box office, I think. That's not even counting, like, Netflix and stuff. So it's like, who knows how much it made total. And that's, like, insane.
I know.
It's so insane. We were trying to do the math to be like, because they made 12,866 times their money, right? And we're like so what percentage on return is that? And
it was so ridiculous we can't even believe
the number was so ridiculous. We're like, that can't be right. And so we're gonna double check our math and put the equation and put the number up and then like put the equation up.
Yeah.
So you guys can like double check our work. But yeah, it's funny.
Was that the first Jason Blum movie?
That was the beginning of. I mean, he was like a fat cat at Miramax,
He was already in the industry.
Which was Paramount's or
Miramax?
Yeah, they were owned by Paramount. I think that was like they were like supposed to be the indie film division, the indie film arm of some major studio. I think it was Paramount because I know Paramount ended up releasing Paranormal Activities, but Jason Blum was like, a senior executive there or something. And he saw the movie at some point and Jason Blum was like, Eureka, holy shit, you can make a movie in one location with like 3 actors? And he's like, I can see the future. He like got out a crystal ball. He's like, this is going to be all I do.
Was there even sound at all other than just like what you hear?
There's occasional music. In fact, because Micah Sloat, the actor, so there's 2 main actors, right? Katie Featherstone, I think, and Micah Sloat.
Micah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mika?
Mika.
Really? Okay.
I think she said Mika in the movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was Mika and Katie.
Yeah. They use their real names. Which goes to... Let's talk about... to get back to the music. So, Mika is actually a musician, and some of his music is actually on the soundtrack, I read. That was news to me. I'm not going to pretend that I knew that. But what I was going to say is they use their real names, which is one of the things this movie did really well. Because this is us talking about, does it hold up? Is it still good? It's watchable, I would say, and it's interesting. It's an amazing feat. But I don't think...
Well, it came out what year? 2010?
2007. 2007 was this weird year that all these like found footage horror movies came out.
Yeah.
Wreck came out from Spain, and this
As Above.
The Poughkeepsie tapes, the Poughkeepsie tapes, which I actually like. There's
very disturbing.
I don't. Found footage is complicated. I don't always love it. As Above, So Below is good. That one's great. If you guys haven't seen that one, and there's a Wreck is good. Super 8 is not exactly a horror movie, but it's pretty good. It's a good movie, and it's like found footage, but it's fatiguing on the eyes, I find.
Yeah, very. I mean, not so much. Paranormal Activity, it wasn't as bad
It's not. It wasn't as bad as Blair Witch.
Yeah.
So let's talk about found footage really quick. So like the original one is Cannibal Holocaust, which, and it's like I'm gonna get dragged for being a horror fan, but I haven't watched it. But in my
We haven't seen it.
I'm an animal rights guy,
yeah.
and they kill a whole bunch of animals on tape. Some of them, like they killed multiple monkeys to film a scene. I just can't do it. I can't, like as scary as horror movies are for me and supposed to be, they're not. They don't feel like I'm doing something wrong. Like they're victimless. To me, it's like you should be scared, but a horror movie should still be, guilt-free, like, throwing in a bottle at the opening band when you're waiting for Guns N' Roses, because they already played Youth Gone Wild and ain't nobody here to see Sebastian Bach.
Stop it.
Oh, sorry. Oh, man, 1991. But it's like I can't watch something where I'm sitting there feeling guilty about seeing a turtle with getting its head cut off and like seeing monkeys get killed. So there it is. I'm not gonna watch.
I'll watch it. I'll watch it for you.
I don't know. It's like I only feel marginally better about that. Like my girlfriend having no empathy towards seeing animals getting brutally killed. Kind of freaks me out a little bit, but. It's
there's empathy.
If you don't know it, it's
affected.
It's an interesting story. Ruggero Deodato, who's an Italian filmmaker who made a lot of he had like a whole cannibal trilogy and made some garbage. It got like after it was screened, like the Italian magistrate like seized it and it turned into this whole court battle, and then he got tried on obscenity charges and he was acquitted, and eventually it came out in '85. But that was like the original, like, hey,
found footage.
Someone was like, documenting something and they got killed during it or whatever, which is what, Blair Witch. And also we should shout out The Last Broadcast because they were the first movie after Cannibal Holocaust. It comes in cycles, it seems like. Cannibal Holocaust came out in '85 finally in America, and then like in the late '90s, all of a sudden it was like Blair Witch. But the year before that, The Last Broadcast, and then after that it disappeared. And then in 2007, it was just like a whole bunch came out again. But where was I going with this? Cannibal Holocaust.
Well, that's it for found footages. So does Paranormal Activity hold up?
I don't.
Should we do Blair Witch? Does Blair Witch hold up?
I found Blair Witch particularly fatiguing to watch.
It is.
On the eyes. It did kind of get under my skin a little bit, but like what all these movies are missing is what they had in the first place, which Cannibal Holocaust started. That's where I was going with this. Is staging, using the real names. Ruggero wouldn't let the actors and actresses who were, supposedly killed, do any interviews or show up at the premiere. And it was presented as though it was real, kind of. And they did the same thing in Blair Witch. And they did the same thing in Paranormal Activities. There was staging involved. Like Mika and Katie talk about how like at the premiere in LA, they like hid across the street and saw this line around the block, and they were like, "Holy shit!" And they wanted to be like, "That's us,"
Did they not get the glory, the fame, or the money?
Well, in the end, they got the fame, but they only got $500, as far as I can tell. I really hope they, I kept searching to see if they got like residuals, like if they got a piece of the box office, but everything.
You need to ask Jason Blum.
Everything, yeah, Jason Blum got some explaining to do. Everything I read online is that they got paid $500, but they don't seem salty about it. Like I haven't seen any interviews where they're complaining about it, making $193 million. Oh, we didn't mention Oren Peli. He's the guy who actually did it first. Oren Peli made this film on his own, in his own house for $15K. And then he was an Israeli video game designer or something. Video game designer, I believe. And Jason Blum saw it and was like, single location, not a lot of speaking roles. And they, the plan was, Paramount bought it, or DreamWorks bought it first, expecting to remake it. But Jason Blum and Oren were convinced that audiences would dig it. And so they included in the contract a thing that said, okay, but before it's remade, we're requiring a test screening. And it killed at the test screening. People loved it. And at the time, you know, like I have friends.
Maybe that's what they used to market in, right? All those jump scares and.
Oh yeah.
Who remembers the marketing for Paranormal Activity?
It's all teenagers, right? It's a bunch
in the movie theater going, huh?
It's a bunch of shit scared teenagers. It's you know, that was all part of the staging, right? I'm really into amusement parks, and like really good rides will stage, meaning that like, you know, while you're waiting in line for a ride, it will be themed. It will like prepare you for the ride, like Disaster Transport. This ride at Cedar Point, while you're waiting in line, it's like there's like space luggage going overhead, and after you land, it's like mocked up like you're on a foreign country or on a foreign planet. And it's like they started doing that around that time. And one of the things, it's related though. It's the same thing. It's like,
yes, I am not a theme park person, but go ahead.
Staging is what that's called with rides, and they were really doing it well with movies around that time, like Blair Witch. Friends of mine got a copy, just like a bootleg. There was bootleg copies of Blair Witch going around in like 97 that were blatantly made by the studio. And they probably made 1,000 copies, and they slapped tape, you know, like masking tape, and wrote the Blair Witch Project on it and passed it around, because some guys I know in Boulder, Colorado in college got a copy and watched it kind of like, is this for real, you know? And were shit scared. And if I didn't know the movie existed, like maybe I would think it was scary, you know? As it was, I didn't particularly think it was.
Yeah, it had its moments, but...
Were you scared the first time you saw it?
No, I don't remember it the first time I saw it. I remember watching it, but not being scared.
What about Paranormal Activities?
No.
No.
It was I would say it was a little scary. More like eerie.
It is eerie. I actually feel like the later ones do that better.
Like her staring at him in the bed.
Yeah,
So it had like its creepy moments.
The creep factor is good. I think it's almost better in the later ones. Like with the outdoor pool, like when they started doing the stuff like in the third one, I think, where there's a pool and you see the security cam just cutting between the cameras, you know, the way like security cams will just every 3 seconds go to a new camera.
Yeah.
That shit was great. Like that was a great device, because all of a sudden it would pop by like the pool and something weird would be happening there, and then it'd immediately be gone. So they got better about that. But I think the original ending, if you haven't seen it, you know what? You guys should watch the original ending. We're gonna try to.
How old is this movie? You should have seen it already.
Yeah, but I don't want to be demanding. You know, I don't want to tell people how to live their lives.
Fine. I think that the theatrical release, I get it. I think it had more impact for being in a movie theater compared to like the original. The original's a little bit. It sets you up for the sequel.
That ending was the only thing that Paramount reshot or put money into. Was the very end of the theatrical one. Are we spoiling here? I mean, are we talking? Let's not. If you haven't seen Paranormal Activities...
There are 3 different endings at this point.
It's like you want to see a movie. If you're cooped up in your house and feel like the answer to that is watching a movie that is strictly taking place in someone else's house, I don't know that actually makes sense, to be honest with you. And if you're like me and you live your life over Zoom, that's the other... I feel like I might have enjoyed it more also if it wasn't like I spent so much time on Zoom. Where it's like I'm looking at like computer camera stuff all the time, and so like watching a movie about it was like fatiguing to the eyes. But if you haven't seen it, you should see it. It's a phenomenon. It's the most successful movie of all time, and it was literally just an inspiration to filmmakers.
You didn't answer the question. Does it hold up?
I thought I did answer that. I don't think it holds up. I think it's one of those things where you got to give it mad respect. It's like early hip hop.
I think I'd respect it more if it was original, if it were the first.
There's a lot of
of its kind, but it's not.
It's in a way it is though, because Cannibal Holocaust, pretty big budget, you know.
It took their blueprint.
It took the found footage, but even Blair Witch wasn't all one location. Blair Witch cost 4 times as much money. If that tells you something about how impressive it is that they made Paranormal Activity for $15K, they spent $60K on Blair Witch.
Yeah.
And that shit looks like a college film.
It does.
But I don't. That being said, it's like I find Paranormal Activities to be, you know, sort of like early '80s hip hop, like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, you know, kind of stuff where it's like you've so much respect for those guys, like doing it first, but it doesn't age well. It's not particularly listenable unless you were at a certain age when that stuff came out. Otherwise, it feels clunky, and I would say the same of Paranormal Activity. It feels a little like it could be shorter. It could be 15 minutes shorter. Blair Witch for sure. It's only 80 minutes, and I was like, they could have. Yeah, it's only 81 minutes or something, and I'm like, man, they could have cut 20 minutes out of this. You know, I think the things that are like 100% in the camera found footage the entire time, I have a hard time with them being even 90 minutes, but they certainly shouldn't be longer. Movies like Ty West's The Sacrament, where it's found footage, but
it's still kind of a movie.
It still feels like a movie, because there's definitely every found footage films always have those moments where, like, if they're strictly found footage, where you're like, come on, who's holding the camera right now? Or like, oh yeah, I'm sure you're fucking running from this guy while you're like keeping a camera held to your face, you know.
Blair Witch had a lot of that.
Yeah, Blair Witch has a lot of that. Where it's like,
there's no way
why
you're
are you
filming
still
right now?
filming right now? But The Sacrament definitely has some moments where you're like, who's holding the camera? You know, or like, wait, where's that sound coming from? Blair Witch had moments too. You pointed out where it's like, sounds like she's holding the camera because her voice is right here. But we're seeing her on the fucking log that they've crossed 3 times. But so I find the ones that are found footage the entire time to be really taxing to watch.
Yeah. And I think they got better after Blair Witch, like Paranormal Activities. That was a little better. Creep.
Wreck is and even though Wreck is like night vision almost the entire time, and it's very strict found footage, and there's not a note of music the entire movie until the end. It did not feel fatiguing. It didn't even scan to me like a found footage film. I wasn't even like, oh, this is a found footage film. The way they set it up with the you know, it being the news person, it was kind of like, oh, it just didn't feel like found footage, and found footage films, like, I keep using the word fatigue, and that's what it's like. I get a fatigue after a while watching them.
I agree.
But Wreck didn't give me that. The Sacrament didn't give me that, but that's because that one breaks it up more, you know.
Creep.
Yeah, Creep
is really good.
Yeah.
1 and 2.
Creep was also one where there's sometimes where it's like, you know, where they're like passing the camera around to try to explain, like, okay, now, you know, now he's holding it. And like, okay, now the serial killer's holding it. Like, where they're trying to explain why the camera is still running.
Yeah.
At least in Jerusalem, that Israeli one, you know, it was like they just explained it with like, oh, someone's got Google glasses. Remember Google glasses?
I remember.
Forgot about Google glasses. Yeah, it was like someone has Google glasses on, and so they're like, okay, that's it. Okay, don't worry about it. You don't got to worry about who's holding the camera.
Yeah.
Someone's just got fucking Google glasses on. But I think, you know, I have a lot of respect for Paranormal Activities. And like I said, some of the later ones kind of did it for me. But, you know, I don't think that it's like, if you haven't seen it and you're not from that era, you're not going to go back and watch it and be like, oh my God, this is so good or so scary. Mm-hmm. Nothing ever seems to be as scary when you go back, I think.
I agree. Imagine watching those horror movies from the 80s.
Yeah.
Like Friday
I've been meaning to watch Nightmare on Elm Street. I've been meaning to watch because that one scared me. That one legitimately scared me. Friday the 13th. We should go back and watch it.
Yeah.
That's a great movie. If anyone out there hasn't actually watched the first Friday the 13th, It is actually a great
That was
horror
a cheap
movie.
one too. That's one of those like cheapest movies ever made.
Yeah, it was like
under $1 million.
Oh, I thought it was like I thought it was like 100 grand. Yeah, I thought it was like 100 grand. That one's great if you haven't seen it. The first time I saw it, it really blew me away because like I'd just been like whatever because I'd seen all these later ones, and it was just like whatever. It's fucking some cheese dick with a hockey mask on, but it's actually way more than that in the first film especially, and to a lesser extent the second film. There's a lot more to the lore and the story and everything in the beginning. Later, it's fucking, Freddy versus Jason on a goddamn spaceship or whatever. Like,
I think that was Freddy and Predator.
No, you're Predator.
Jason and Predator.
You're thinking Predator versus Alien.
Oh yeah, all those damn crossovers.
Which is like,
I actually like them.
Which is hilarious. I have not watched any of them. I have to be honest. I was pretty convinced I was not gonna like them, so I didn't watch them.
Fair enough.
What's your favorite found footage? Do you have one?
I really liked Wreck. That was a really good one.
Yeah, you did really like Wreck. Wreck was really good. I would say the first three are all really good. The fourth one is still...
Is that the wedding?
The second one I think is the wedding.
Oh, I like
second one's really good. Second one they explain some more.
It continues straight from the first.
Yeah, which is cool. We always like that. Like Insidious, which by the way was produced by Oren Peli. All three of them. Oren Peli. Yeah, and Jason Blum. They were like partners in crime early on. He's like the less known one, right? Like he's like in the Neptunes. It's like everybody knows Pharrell, but nobody knows Hugo. Chad Hugo, is that his name? It's like Oren Peli was exactly. Oren Peli was the guy that no one knew in that team early on because they were totally involved. And Oren Peli was actually offered the chance to direct The Conjuring, and he was like, I'm fucking over it. He said that like making films can be such a miserable experience that if it doesn't turn out well, like you just feel like you wasted like a couple of years of your life. Also, it's got to be hard after you make a film for $15K and like own every aspect of the creative process, and it's the most successful film of all time. How do you follow that?
Yeah.
Like, all of a sudden you got...
So I'm going to quit while I'm ahead.
And that's... he has a quote that's basically like that, where he's sort of like... Where he's basically like, I'm just going to go out on top, But he's like, and I don't want to shoot films at my... Paranormal Activities... It's fine. Paranormal Activities was at his house in San Diego, which was like... I wonder if he was married at that point. Like, that's a tough sell to your wife, Like... Hey, I'm going to have some strangers over to shoot a horror movie.
How much are they paying you? He's like, well...
Technically, I'm spending $15,000 to make the movie, but there's a chance I'll make $193 million. She's like, yeah, I'm so sure.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, hopefully for his sake, he didn't get married until after he made $193 million because, that's a better time. That's a better time. Shame. What else? You got anything else to say about Paranormal Activities?
I like the franchise.
There's like
I don't know.
seven,
I think horror
right?
movies have gotten so much better since that when you go back and watch these. For me, it's like watching the 80s horror movies that I grew up on. They just come across as a little cheesy, fake.
Yeah, it's...
when you start watching like Insidious and Conjuring, they're on a different level and you're just like, whoa.
Yeah. Insidious, really great. Also picks up right where the second one picks up right where the first one leaves off, just like Wreck, which is always cool. But Dawn of the Dead did that? No. Day of the Dead? No, Dawn of the Dead. One of those picked up kind of right where the first.
So many dead.
So many dead.
Yeah.
But if you haven't seen it, if you're a horror fan, you haven't seen it, you should see it because it was definitely a kind of watershed moment in horror. All the modern horror that's shot in one location with hardly anybody in it, it's like that's all Paranormal Activity.
Yeah.
And to a lesser extent, Blair Witch. But Paranormal Activity really distilled the formula down to like, because they didn't need a cameraman even.
Mm-hmm. I do find Blair Witch more, if I were to believe all this crap, more believable than Paranormal Activities, though.
That's true. I would say there's something there's an element of realism.
It's more real.
And there's also stuff that's scary in it that's not supernatural, right? Yeah. Being lost in the woods. That's totally real. You know, like...
One of your buddies having a mental breakdown.
Having a breakdown. Being in charge and everything going to shit, you know? And on top of that, what I found to be scariest in that movie is there's these like spasms of like violence that aren't like, the violence isn't bad, but they ramp up really quickly. The way things do when people are under great stress. And so like they'll kind of start fighting and all of a sudden one of them will start screaming and grab the other one. And I found those to be the scariest parts of the film because it felt so much like real violence. Yeah, and I thought that was the best part of Blair Witch by far. Blair Witch, some of those movies, part of the problem too is like they weren't designed for high def. The graininess is even worse in high def. It's like there's parts where it's like, am I looking at a Jackson Pollock picture, like painting right now? Like I don't know what I'm looking at because the graininess is so intense in the HD. That's true. And it's like I feel like that also makes it harder on your eyes eventually. But you know, that was the first time I'd seen Blair Witch like 5 days ago. I missed it because I was like on tour.
Paranormal also.
Yeah, that's true. We had a fight about it. Hashtag quarantine living, you know.
I saw you seen it.
Stir crazy. She was sure I'd seen it before, and we straight up, you know, like the dumb fights you have when you're around someone for 24 hours a day for like 2 straight weeks. We had a blowout over whether I'd seen Paranormal Activities.
I still think he's seen it, but
I have not. I'm 100%. Here comes one of those Blair Witch spasms of violence. Shit's gonna ramp up, and I'm gonna start choking you about not seeing Paranormal Activity. I 100%. That was the first time I'd ever seen it. But I'd seen a bunch of the later ones with you in the theater. Even that was the beginning of us realizing you couldn't see mainstream horror movies in New York City unless you go really late in their run on a Tuesday, because otherwise there's going to be a bunch of shithead teenagers there. Yeah, and you're going to be like, you know, like, do I care enough to get shanked, basically? Like, am I going to get into it with this guy? Care enough to get shanked? But watch if you haven't seen it. It's, you might, you know, relate to it in some ways. It seemed too obvious to do one of the Outbreak or like, you know, Quarantine seemed too obvious. And it's not good. Watch Wreck, you know? Yeah. Although Wreck 2 is really where it's more of a quarantine in the second one, kind of, right? Oh, no, that's the wedding. No, the third one's where they go back into the building, right? Yeah. The building's, like, covered, and, like, that one's great, too. Even though, like, the characters are all, like, very, you know, stock, like, classic. Like, there's, you know, the little girl and the old man and the person who's got fucking diabetes or asthma and doesn't have their medication, always, you know, whatever.
It's a shame that, it's not a shame, but it's too bad we've seen all the quarantine movies, and now we're in quarantine. It's like I already saw all of them.
Flu's good. If you haven't seen that one, Korean one. If you guys want like Outbreak recommendations, you know, like Flu
or Apocalypse. We saw a really good Apocalypse one last night, actually. The Road.
Yeah, The Road. You know, it's funny. I heard people who've read the book are always like, oh, the movie's not as good, and it's probably not. And it was a little heavy-handed in places, but overall, I actually thought it was great, and it was also fun to watch because I always kind of had a feeling that, and I feel like I read it somewhere, that The Last of Us video game was kind of inspired by The Road. And seeing it, I see it. And also Days Gone, the video game, is also clearly inspired by The Road. So it was cool to watch it, and it looks amazing. For that alone, almost you should watch it. It's the look of it. It's fantastic. So this camera has like a built-in editor of us that just like shuts us down when we're talking too much. Right. So it's enough. It apparently decided that was enough of us talking about Paranormal Activities and Outbreak movies. It basically was like, if you want to talk about Outbreak movies, why don't you make another video about Outbreak movies? Anyway, thanks for listening.
Cheers.
Cheers. Stay safe. Wash your hands. 20 seconds.
And drink wine. What you having whiskey?
And drink wine. You know, there was a guy who like cut himself on Ebola glass and was waiting to get Ebola, and he like drank a whole shit ton of whiskey, and he didn't end up getting it, even though it was so contagious. And he was always convinced that it was like
Whiskey?
that the alcohol it so like doused himself in alcohol in his bloodstream that it killed the virus.
Okay.
I'm not going to recommend that if you think you got exposed to COVID, you should absolutely get shit-faced, but it's something to think about. Thanks for listening.